some kind of transformation of category, where things are made out of things which are impossible. I mean, as I said, how can something be made out of yesterday, consomme, and hope? It's impossible to conceive of something like that. And so, in the presence of these puns, they break down ordinary reality even more than it's broken down anyway in the DMT state. It's like, it's not enough that you're loaded on this psychedelic mega hallucinogen. Now they tell you crazy jokes, which you get in that state. It's sort of like the surrealists used this, saw the pun as a way of opening the crack between the worlds. And it would be a great challenge to artists to do this. I mean, the surrealist I'm thinking of who certainly leaned on this was René Magritte, where, foreground and background trade shape, and outlines of things are silhouettes of other things, and this sort of thing. Maybe it's a uniquely human capacity, and we can argue about whether animals think or not, but I don't think anybody would give you much of an argument that they pun. There's very little evidence of that.
Terence, what about psychotherapy?
Well, I think anything which gets people free associating and talking freely and making previously hidden connections in their biographical material, in doing that in the presence of a skilled therapist. If the therapist then practices their craft with skill, it's hard to see how that isn't going to synergize the therapeutic process.
Is there a venue for that in this country?
You mean, are there people doing it?
Yes.
Well, it's very underground because giving people these things without an IND is illegal, and here you're dealing with people who are already self-defined as needing psychotherapy. But some of you may know that book, The Secret Chief, about a psychotherapist. To this day, those of us who know him don't use his real name in public. In the book, he's called Jacob. But Jacob was a guy who so strongly believed in psychedelics. He was a superb therapist to begin with, fully credentialed. And he taught hundreds of people how to do psychedelic therapy. And someday that story will be told, because I think that was the heart and soul of transpersonal psychology in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The joke on psychotherapy is whether you're Jungian, Reichian, Kleinian, whatever you are, 1/3 get better, 1/3 get worse, 1/3 stay the same. Well, I don't really think that's true of psychedelic therapy. And the psychedelic therapy, it's arguable, or it's a complex issue, whether it should be used in cases where people are severely disturbed. The people who seem to profit most from psychedelics taken in the presence of psychotherapists are people I would describe as the worried well. People who are anxious or have hit a block in their career or have a relationship coming apart. But these things happen to people. And, I know psychotherapists who I really believe probably 95% of every psychotherapeutic session they have with somebody changes a life for decades, if not forever. It's one of the great tragedies, and, we've taught McCarthyism has been bared, and the blacklists in Hollywood, we've all done our mea culpas for that, and the Rosenbergs and so forth and so on. But we've never, as a society, dealt with the way science and human mental health care was sacrificed on the altar of government paranoia in the 60s in the name of repressing psychedelic drugs. I mean, there was work going on at Saskatoon in Canada with Humphrey Osmond and in other places. They were curing serious lifelong alcoholism with a single dose of 500 gamma of LSD in the presence of a psychotherapist. They were having incredible results, treating addiction, serious trauma, all of this stuff. Well, then that just went down the tubes. And the psychotherapeutic community didn't have the political muscle or the guts or something to resist that. The scientific community, which is very quick to tell government and everybody else to take their hands off. They can do anything they want with studying human sexuality. They can do anything they want with animal experiments. They can do anything they want. Well, they just totally folded on this drug thing. And, you know, my brother is a professional drug designer, molecular chemist, and his career, this whole story of his career is how unwelcome and threatened people felt by having good psychochemists in their presence. If you're going into medical pharmacology, stay away from psychedelics if you want to have any career at all. The number of people who've been able to overcome those barriers and make significant careers and do research and publish, you can count on the finger of one hand.
Is that true for the international community as well?
It's not as bad, but it's still, most of the world just doesn't deal with it. I mean, Germany, there's some people, chemists, other people interested, so some Swiss people. It's sort of traditional there, you know. I mean, try and name a psychedelic drug that wasn't invented within 700 miles of Berlin. It can't be done. But, you know, the Japanese make no contribution. The English make no contribution. The French make no contribution. It's just not looked at. Bizarre. Because the impact, you know, if you're a psychotherapist or a neurophysiologist or anybody else, the impact of giving somebody 200 micrograms of LSD, which is a vanishingly small amount of physical material, is just stunning. But it's not been pursued. Yeah. Ibogaine is interesting. Ibogaine is a psychoactive alkaloid that occurs in a plant, Tabernantha iboga, that occurs in Western Africa, in the armpit of Africa, in Gabon and Zaire, and it's used traditionally, although we have no record of it being used by anybody before 1850, which is kind of peculiar, because it looks like an ancient usage, like people have been at this for thousands of years. But the Portuguese have been in there since the 1430s, and there's no mention of Ibogaine before 1850. It's a bush. You scrape the bark. You eat it. You hallucinate. The alkaloid is unique and psychoactive on its own. The reason research is being done in this country and it's being somewhat talked about is because the claim is made that it interrupts heroin and cocaine addiction dramatically. I wouldn't rush to sign up for that. I mean, it may. I think all psychedelics have this ability. It's not that Ibogaine is a magic bullet for heroin addiction. It's that if you take a strong psychedelic and you're an alcoholic or a junkie or an abuser or fucked up in some way, it's going to be very hard to go through that trip without confronting this. And then you just say, you know, I'm killing myself, or I'm making the people around me unhappy and killing myself. And it's hard, once you actually say these words to yourself, not to form what good Catholics call a purpose of amendment, you know, to try and do better. So, you know, people say, well, this question of are we better people, I think it's possible to be a bad person and take psychedelics, but it's rare because it requires enormous powers of denial and ego. Most psychedelic people are pretty mellow because they're used to looking at the shadow and confronting the various facets of themselves and other people. It's a tolerant, gentle crowd, generally speaking.